Okay, Dennis, could you tell us? Well, last time I interviewed you, we talked about your experience at LaSalle, and after LaSalle, after you graduated from LaSalle, you ended up at the Citadel, which was a far away from Asheroken. How did you go from going to LaSalle and living in Asheroken to ending up at the Citadel, which is in Charleston, South Carolina?
Well, that's a long story, Dan. Uh,
Well,
if I told you the whole details of it, it would take the whole half hour.
just give me the
But,
highlights.
well, the highlights were, at LaSalle, I was above average student,
Mhm.
in grades. Um, College boards, I did very well in math, well above average. In English, I was just about average.
Mhm.
And my desire was really to go to West Point.
Mhm.
And number one, I would have had to get some help. I needed an appointment. I couldn't get one. So as you know, I played a lot of sports
Mhm.
at LaSalle, and I applied to about six different colleges for scholarships and for acceptance. And lo and behold, in early December, I got notified by Marquette University that they were offering me a football scholarship for 4 years when I signed on a dotted line.
Mhm.
So at Christmas time, when people said, "Well, how you doing on college?" I said, "Well, I signed a contract to go to Marquette,
Mhm.
free ride for Pop, And when I went back to school in January, I got called down to the coach's office, and he said, "I got bad news and good news." He said, "The bad news is over the Christmas holidays, Marquette voted to do away with football and put all their money in basketball."
Hmm.
So here it is now, January. I have disregarded all the other colleges I applied to because I signed a contract with Marquette.
Right.
So right now I have no school to go to.
Mhm.
And the coach said, "Well, there's some good news. This afternoon we have a guy that's been watching you for 3, 4 years. I played varsity soccer. I played my freshman year. I was the only freshman on the varsity team, and I was first team. So I played soccer. I I boxed. I played football. I played baseball. So I was an all around jock.
Mhm.
And uh, and did pretty damn well in all those sports.
Mhm.
Uh, but I stopped all those applications once I signed the contract for Marquette.
Right.
And then, of course, Marquette's gone. And I called Pop and I said, "Pop, I lost the scholarship to Marquette. This is about 2.5 weeks uh, after I got the word from my coach that they wanted me to go for an interview to Kings Point
Mhm.
because Kings Point was interested in all three of my major sports: boxing, football, and baseball."
Now, at that point, I think you told me last time that you started to think about going to a military career in your senior year at LaSalle. When we got the thing from Marquette didn't work out, had you applied only to military schools?
No, no, I applied to, a number of, there was a school, Miami of Ohio.
Hmm.
There are a number of schools I applied to, uh, mostly trying to get a scholarship. There were eight of us in the family, eight
Right.
siblings. So, you know, uh, anyway, so Pop and I, that following weekend after I called him, we went to Kings Point.
Hmm.
I met all the coaches, uh, and they said you're going to get an appointment from a senator in Wyoming,
Hmm.
and so here I am now going to Kings Point, supposed to be starting in September.
Hmm.
Well, I told you my math college boards were pretty high,
Right.
but my English was down about average, about 500 or whatever the average was back then. And so they had a rule at the service academies. You had to have a minimum total college board score to be accepted into the school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that minimum because of my high math scores.
Mm-hmm.
When you add it to the English, it gave me more than the points I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So the school made some exceptions because they had a minimum in English and a minimum in math.
Right.
But for the athletic department, as long as the student had the total that he needed, they
Right.
would let him go to the school.
Right. So what happened?
So what happened was Kennedy got elected, and
Right.
one of the things he did as he got into the presidency, he changed all the superintendents at the military academies
Mm-hmm.
to Democrats.
Right.
And so the guy that had been in charge when I got my acceptance back in January or February, whatever it was, he left and a new guy came in.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he did is he was not happy with the athletic department
Mm-hmm.
and their exceptional rules for this deal where as long as the kids got the total, not the minimums.
Right.
So I get this call 2 weeks before graduation, a little over 2.5 weeks before graduation,
Mm-hmm.
thinking I've got boots I'm breaking in. They're giving me my shoes to break in. I made 3 trips to Kings Point,
Right.
which was only 30 miles away from where we lived in Asheroken. That I am now not enrolled in the next class because I didn't meet the new requirements of the
Okay.
English.
So
So they wanted
how
they
did
wanted
Citadel? How did you end up at the Citadel then? So I understand that one fell
because
through.
so I called Pop to tell him this just fell through. He said, "What did you do with your application to the Citadel?" I said, "Well, that was from last year when I was trying to get a scholarship. If I got anything left, it's in my desk." He said, "Okay, I'll call you in a couple days." Pop had a meeting with, he bought a lot of fabric because he bought all the dresses for J.C. Penney,
Right.
and he'd pick out not just the style of the dresses, but the fabrics.
Right.
And one of his big fabric supporters was Derry Milliken, whose
Right.
major plant was down in Georgetown, South Carolina.
Okay.
And the guy that ran that place was a good friend of Pop's because Pop
Mm-hmm.
had been dealing with him for almost 30 years. And he was also on the board of governors for the Citadel.
Right.
So Pop goes down to Derry Milliken to buy fabric. He comes home, he calls me, when I'm still at LaSalle, we had phone booths. He calls me and says, "Hey, Den, you're going to the Citadel and you're going to major in electrical engineering."
Okay. Hold off on the major. So that's I understand how you got to the Citadel. That's so basically it was the Kings
It
Point
was
thing
Pop
fell
and the
through.
board of governors.
Okay. Good. Okay. So that's how you ended up. You had you ever been to South Carolina before?
Oh, we driven through it. We stopped there a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you end up at the Citadel, and the Citadel, as I recall, my recollection may be a little bit hazy because I am a bit younger than you, but I do recall that General Mark Clark was the superintendent of the Citadel. And I
Yep.
knew of later on, and I remember when I went to the campus, they had that special little kind of mini museum that had the periscope from that spy mission he had. I know in watching the movie Patton, they referenced General Clark and his command in Italy. And also, I know General Clark was a major general in the Korean conflict. And I also recall that he stepped down or he retired the same year you graduated. So my question to you was, how was General Clark viewed by the Corps of Cadets, the people who, the students? How did they view General Clark?
Oh, they had a very, very high respect for him. He was well liked, and I especially liked General Clark. He was a good guy.
And what made him, why was he so respected and why did you think so positively of him?
Well, he served in the military for damn near 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
He retired as a 4-star general.
Mm-hmm.
He did have some problems during World War II with the Salerno campaign, but
Mm-hmm.
war's hell.
Yeah.
Look at what we're going through now.
Yeah.
Uh,
So your personal view of him was very kind of paralleled what the other cadets thought of him. They respected his longevity in the military and
I probably had a deeper respect for him because of um, he was one of the guys that uh, my senior year I became a battalion commander, and
right.
this is the decisions on what rank and what job you're going to have are
Hmm.
made by the cadre, the
Hmm.
active duty military that are assigned to the school.
Hmm.
And that included Army, Air Force, Navy, and so on. And of course, Clark was a big figure, and he was the superintendent. So he wanted to make sure the regimental commander and the four battalion commanders were people that he thought pretty highly of. And
Right.
so,
Okay.
unbeknownst to me, he he picked me the end of my junior year. He picked me to be the fourth battalion commander my senior year.
Mhm. Okay. Dan, that's a bit removed from when you started there as a plebe. I remember going down there, I think when we brought Charlie down there and there was a newspaper and it was how the plebe viewed himself. And there was this picture of the soldier in a uniform and dress uniform looking very impressive. And there was a picture of the plebe as how the upperclassmen viewed him. And I remember from reading Pat Conroy's My Losing Season when he went back to the Citadel and interviewed a lot of the guys he was on the basketball team. He described Hell Week. I don't know if that's the term that they used when you were there, but can you describe what Hell Week was like? Was that what they called it when you went there for the plebes, their initiation?
Yeah, I think that's what they called it. I mean, we're talking, well over 60 years ago. So,
Okay.
uh, you know, uh,
Can you
uh,
describe it briefly what it was like as a plebe to go through that?
well, for me, it wasn't hard at all because I had all this training at LaSalle.
Hmm.
And we not only trained, in manual of arms and marching and parades or shining our shoes or all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I was coasting along pretty good until halfway through the first week, we got our rifles.
Hmm.
And we kept our rifles in our room.
Hmm.
But so the first day we roll out and we're going to learn how to do manual of arms. So the squad leader gives right shoulder arms. And of course, having had a rifle at LaSalle for 3 years,
Hmm.
my fourth year I had a saber, but I knew the manual arms. So the next thing I know, I'm doing right shoulder arms, and the rest of the squad doesn't know what they're doing.
Hmm.
So they zero in on me and they say, "Where did you learn how to do that?" And so my secret was kept pretty well for 3 days.
Right.
But then they discovered that I had gone to a military college.
Uh-huh.
So they just turned the screws on me a little tighter.
Okay.
But it just
Did,
had to do with reacting to their yelling and screaming and push ups, and I
right.
had no trouble doing 60, 70 push ups. And
Did you
uh,
think that at the time that Hell Week served a purpose?
well, yeah, it got all the cadets at least on a baseline
Hmm.
on how to march, how to do manual of arms, how to clean your weapons, how to wear your uniform properly and march and so on and so forth. So there
Right.
was a minimum standard that they needed to get those cadets to
Hmm.
so that when the rest of the regiment came back, 10 days later, uh, we could fall in on the formations and not look like a bunch of thumbs marching out
All
there.
right. So it
And
did. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so it got you into a routine of getting up, at quarter to 6 in the morning and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So it established the regiment for you.
Right.
So it was easier for you to fall in with the rest of the students.
Did you learn lessons from Hell Week that you applied in your various tours of Vietnam?
Well, I think I learned a little bit more about leadership,
Hmm.
you know, uh, and that's all I learned during the Hell Week.
Leadership in what sense? If you look at Hell Week, well, what leadership lessons did you learn in Hell Week?
Well, how to give commands,
Hmm.
uh, how to teach people how to march, and uh, the this was more of an academic. We didn't do any field training during Hell Week.
Right.
No tactical training during Hell Week. That was later on as I was a cadet.
Okay. You're obviously your faith life is a big part of your life and a big part of your life as a soldier. What was your faith life like at the Citadel?
Well, the Catholics, we had our own mass on Sunday morning, and the Protestants or the rest of the cadets had their own service. So we would get to chapel first,
Hmm.
and we have to get up earlier, and we wouldn't march over. We just assemble over at the Summerall Chapel, which was an ecumenical chapel.
Hmm.
All the people used it. So, and we had a priest that was assigned out of the diocese to take care of the Citadel cadets. So we had the same guy for 4 years.
Hmm.
He didn't live on campus. He had times that he would come give confessions. We do different prayer services at certain
Was that
times.
Father Hoppy? Do you remember his name, the priest?
No, I don't recall his name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the priest you had at the Citadel, I think may have visited us once in Esheroken. At least I seem to remember that. But my recollection.
So by the time I was a senior, the diocese and the school had come up with enough money to modify an area in Mark Clark Hall, not the Summerall Chapel, that would be just the Catholic chapel.
Hmm.
So starting my senior year, we had our own little chapel.
So is your faith life there mainly going to services on Sunday? Was there anything else that you were involved with?
Well, we had, during Holy Week and uh, Advent, we had uh, different services that we would go to.
Right.
And then on certain holy days, we'd have a service. And the rest of the time, it was just you could go to the chapel, but you knew you weren't in the Catholic chapel. You were just in the Summerall Chapel
Right.
that
You
sat
mentioned,
like,
go ahead.
I was going to say, it sat like 4,000 people.
Yeah. At LaSalle, there were a couple of brothers who had a real strong impact on you. Did you have any relationship with any of the clergy at the Citadel, or was it more just a transactional thing on Sunday?
Well, I had a little bit of a contact with the clergy, with the priest. We didn't. He was the only guy we had.
Hmm.
In the fact that I was a battalion commander and sort of was responsible to make sure all the Catholics that I knew that were in my battalion were going to church,
Hmm.
and practicing their faith. But I didn't have any real deep relationship with him, no.
Okay. So was part of your duty as a battalion commander to make sure the Catholics went to church?
Well, I sort of took that on as my own.
So they didn't get
I
demerits.
didn't have anybody supervising me on that, no.
Right.
But if those Catholics didn't go to the mass early in the morning, they had to march with the rest of the regiment
Hmm.
to the Protestant service that they had in the Summerall Chapel. It's just
Hmm.
Summerall uh, church that they had there.
So was worship required in the life of you had to go somewhere on Sunday?
You had to go somewhere.
Huh,
So yeah.
interesting. Okay. I remember, you were the first of the 8 kids to graduate from college. So Pop, as you know, brought the whole family down there, including me. And I remember at your graduation, there was somebody that had a sign off in the distance that said, "Have fun in Vietnam." And that you graduated, I recall, in May or June of 1965. So the war was just starting to, was, well underway. It was before the escalation. How did the war impact your actual time at the Citadel?
Well, our tactical training was focused on squads and platoons,
Hmm.
you know, and those techniques, tactics, and procedures that we learned uh, served us well wherever we went,
Hmm.
And if you remember, my first assignment was at Fort Jackson,
Hmm.
teaching basic training, marksmanship to recruits, that came into the Army.
Hmm.
Then my next job was, besides the schools that I went to, that I got sent to Germany
Right. Well, let's hold off on that. So I'm getting back in terms of when you were at Vietnam, when you were at the Citadel and Vietnam was war was underway. So the major impact it had on you is the tactics they emphasized in your training.
Yeah, they emphasize small unit tactics because
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have hundreds of thousands of soldiers
Mm-hmm.
in Vietnam in 1965,
Right.
but they had hundreds of thousands of soldiers in Europe and
Mm-hmm.
all over the world. Uh, so they wanted to get you, well trained in the infantry, small unit tactics,
Right.
techniques, and procedures, we call them.
Okay. So, but was that impact? Is that something that they had just been always part of the training, or is that something that was impacted by the fact that the Vietnam War was going on? So, was the training? Was that a
Beats the hell out of me. All I know is that's the training we got. So
okay?
I don't know what they did the year before or the year before, but that's the
Was
training I got for 4 years there.
was there much discussion amongst the Corps of Cadets about the war and what direction the war was taking, or
No,
that was before the major escalation, right? When you were there.
right, right, right.
Okay.
Uh, uh, we'd read about it every so often in the local newspaper,
Hmm.
but we didn't get the Washington Post or the, New York Times.
Hmm.
We didn't get any of those big magazines unless you went over to the library. And if I went to the library, I was too busy studying for my next classes. So I didn't have time to read those magazines. And there were no computers and all that kind of stuff. So,
Okay.
you know,
So obviously, it was a long way between you having to admit you went to a military high school in your Hell Week to you becoming one of the part of the command structure at the Citadel. Um, do you so you had various leadership roles in the Corps of Cadets, and were there like key events or lessons along the way that went from you being a plebe to you being a commander there? Were there key
yeah,
events or lessons?
you got evaluated every day
Hmm.
on what you did, what you didn't do, from merits and demerits and all this other kind of stuff. And you also got evaluated by every cadet in your company when you were a plebe. And then when you were a sophomore, you were evaluated by the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And when you were a junior, you were evaluated by your juniors and the seniors.
Hmm.
Then your senior year, they stopped giving you evaluations because you were in the leadership position that they decided that you were qualified for.
Were there certain events in those evaluations that stick out in terms of being pivotal in terms of you becoming a
Well, my
commander?
freshman year, I was a plebe,
Hmm.
you know, and my sophomore year, they made me a corporal.
Hmm.
I was ranked second in my company, so I became a corporal.
Hmm.
My junior year, I was rated first in my company, so I became the first sergeant of the
Hmm.
company. And then my senior year, uh, between my ratings from from the battalion, sorry, the company I was in, and the cadre that decided where you were going to go, influenced by the commandant of cadets, General Clark, and his staff, I ended up as wanting to be a battalion commander,
Hmm.
and that's the job I got. They asked me if I wanted to be on the regimental staff as the deputy regimental commander, who was also a cadet lieutenant colonel. And I said, no, 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 no. I want to get ready for the army.
Hmm.
Let me be a battalion commander, and sure enough, that's what I job I got, and it definitely prepared me for the army.
Right. I remember in Ashirokan, and I'm going back, this has got to be, we left Ashirokan in 1974. So this is going back, geez, 50, 60 years, more 60 years ago. I remember in the basement hanging on the wall was a framed article from a newspaper in Charleston talking about you having been awarded the Society of Cincinnati, which I think was an award given by the state of South Carolina. And I remember, if my memory serves me correctly, in the article, they made a big deal about you being from the North and you being a Roman Catholic. And I think they said you were the first Northerner, the first Roman Catholic. So if that my recollection is true, what was the bigger event, the biggest surprise, being the first Northerner or being the first Roman Catholic?
Well, it was a surprise to start with, but the I found out a couple of years later after I graduated that I was a captain or something. Um, I ran into one of my classmates that was on the regimental staff,
Mm-hmm.
and he said there were two things that really influenced that award. And it wasn't being a Northerner or it wasn't being a Catholic. Number one, uh, I had gone to Fort Devens for summer camp
Mm-hmm.
as a Army ROTC cadet. And at the time, there were five armies in our, we had the First Army, Second Army, Third Army, and each of those armies around the United States had a summer camp for the cadets
Mm-hmm.
from the schools that were in their area.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the Third Army area, and they sent me to Fort Devens.
Yeah.
But there was Fort Benning, there was Fort Lewis, and you might remember that at Fort Devens, I mean, luck was with me. I mean, I got again. You got rated every day for everything you did. You got
Right.
rated by your platoon. You got rated by the cadre. You got rated on your PT test. You got rated on your written tests. You got rated on your marksmanship. And then if you were high enough in your company, you got recommended to be considered for uh, the first cadet in the summer camp. And there
Mm-hmm.
were 1,400 kids at Fort Devens.
Right.
And so, I mean, everything just worked out for me. And, I had that training at LaSalle and the Citadel. So marching and basic military questions like what's the maximum effective range of an M60 machine gun? I mean,
Right.
I knew that when I was 13 years old.
Right.
So I and then I had to go before this board, and apparently I answered all the questions to them. And lo and behold, I was selected as the number one cadet at a 1,400 at
Yep.
Fort Devens.
Yeah, I remember when you got that award, and it was something. So, do you think that the fact that you won that award fed into the getting the awarded from the state of South Carolina as well? Those two are related.
Well, the Order of Cincinnati is not just the South Carolina award, it's a national award.
Mm-hmm.
So many schools uh, take advantage of that award.
Mm-hmm.
The award has to be approved not just by the school, but by the association. They got a group a board, and whatever it is, that approves the recommendations or disapproves.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, coming out first at Fort Devens was kind of a surprise. Uh, but I had all that training, 8 years of military school,
Mm-hmm.
almost 7 years of military school. I didn't know until 3 weeks later that not only was I first at Fort Devens, but when they took a look at all the five different armies and their summer camps,
Mm-hmm.
there was a total of 4,400 ROTC Army cadets that summer that went to summer camps.
Mm-hmm.
And they evaluated me as the number one ROTC cadet in all 4,400 students.
Mm.
I didn't know that at first, but those two things and some of the leadership challenges I had as a battalion commander.
Mm-hmm.
The 4th Battalion was kind of a wild unit,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I didn't think I was in N Company. I didn't think our company was wild, but T Company, O Company, and R Company they were wild.
Mm-hmm.
And they had what they called, the rules for seniors,
Mm-hmm.
and they made lots of exceptions for seniors that came in late from leave or got caught drinking in the barracks or sneaking, trying to sneak women into the barracks and all this. They made all these exceptions. But when I became battalion commander, first day I had the whole battalion there. I got them together and I said, look, I'm the new guy. I'm the battalion commander. A lot of you know me. All of the N Company knows me.
Hmm.
But we got a blue book. It's got rules in there. And, if you violate one of the standards that are in that book, you got a new standard.
Right.
So you can expect me to enforce the rules and regulations that are in that blue book for every class.
So it would be fair to say you made it a priority of changing the culture
I
there.
changed the culture, yeah, and
Yeah.
took a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't
Okay.
even want to go into all those things that they try to
No, but
do to
it
me.
sounds like when you got that award, the Cincinnati award, that and the Cincinnati, I believe, wasn't that the Citizen Soldier, Cincinnati? Is that the
Yeah, I think
uniform?
so.
Okay. Okay.
So
So,
I think General Clark got involved in that, of course,
mhm,
and I think that the Fort Devens and coming out first in ROTC summer camp for the whole Army ROTC cadets, and the way that I ran that battalion,
mhm,
he was involved in a lot of the disciplinary actions I took against seniors and juniors that thought there was a special rule for them,
right.
not the rule that the other people had. So he was very influential in that.
Okay.
And he told me uh, that he considered me the most promising ROTC Army cadet that he had at the Citadel.
That's high praise. Okay. Coming up to the end of our half hour here. So, when you were approaching graduation, I was there. I remember that day you graduated. I remember Clark handing you your diploma. There was a picture. You were dressed in your white uniform, and Uncle Freddie had a big picture of that above his dresser in his apartment. When you approached graduation, what did you want to do next at that point? What was your
Well, number one, I knew I was going in the Army pretty quick because I was a regular Army officer.
Mhm,
And the second thing, and very important, was that, I was looking forward to marrying my grammar school girlfriend.
mhm.
Those were my two priorities.
Okay. All right. When you look back now, like, last question I got for you here. When you look back at your 4 years at the Citadel, if you had to summarize the two or three things you learned that were most important to you, what were they?
Well, the first is that if the Army had a standard, that standard held for everybody,
Hmm.
from private through general.
Hmm.
Now, some of those senior guys are still violating rules and getting away with it.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of politics to higher up. General Clark told me one time that the higher you go up the flagpole, the more your ass shows. You know, so so, and he says once you get out of the Army, remember it's a short walk from the throne to the shit house.
Right.
And so I got a lot of good. And General Steiner, who I worked for later, one of my favorite generals on active duty, I worked for him twice. He was really became a mentor to me. He was just great. But
Hmm.
those that standard is one standard. I mean, that's
Hmm.
just the way it is. And I learned that in spades at the Citadel.
Okay.
And the second thing I learned was the fact that you got a plan. You got a
Hmm.
plan for not just tomorrow. You got to lay out a plan for your academics. You got to lay out your plan for your life. You
Hmm.
know, uh, I remember when I bought life insurance and car insurance my junior year. Pop says, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Well, I just think that's a good thing to start with." And
Hmm.
the insurance policy I bought gives me certain options. Once you get married, you can increase the insurance. You have a kid, you can increase the insurance, and
Hmm.
so on. So I learned the idea of planning
Hmm.
and planning for not just next week, but for the future.
Hmm. Okay. Good. Were there things that you wish in retrospect that you should have learned at the Citadel that you didn't learn? Things that later on in your career you said, I wish I would have learned that at the Citadel?
Well, I think teaching large groups of people, you know, more than 100 people,
Hmm.
uh, and the deal about lesson plans and the standards and all the stuff you got to come up with. Uh, I could have done a better job learning more about that. And so I learned all that in the Army.
Right.
And lo and behold, I became a teacher at the Army Basic course. I became a teacher at the Armor Advanced course. I became a teacher at the Command and General Staff College. I became a teacher at the Army War College.
Mhm.
Besides being a teacher though in the 9 commands that I had in the Army, it didn't take me long to realize. And the guys that taught me was that first assignment.
Mhm.
When I graduated, I got my diploma, but then I went over to the senior Army professor of military science to receive my commission.
Right.
And I get this little envelope and I sit back in my seat and being a cur, I'm sort of in the middle of the alphabet. So I got time to open this thing while the other guys are going up and getting the diploma. And
Right.
it's a telegram. It's not a commission. And if you remember, it was a telegram from my commanding officer at Fort Jackson,
Right.
which was 110 miles north of the Citadel, saying that he wanted me in his office by 6 o'clock that night. So I didn't get to enjoy the party. I said, Pop, should I throw this out? And remember, Dad was a private World War II. He says, son, you get 2 beers, and 3 hours from now, you're going to be in a car and you're going to be headed to Fort Jackson. Sign in and plead with that company commander that you need to come home because you're going to get engaged. You got all these other things going on, and you want to get ready for your actual move to active duty.
Right.
So that guy made me go on active duty on the 29th of May, which is the same day that my diploma says I graduated from the Citadel.
Mm.
So I was actually on active duty before any West Point cadet,
Right.
before any cadet anywhere that was in an ROTC program that year.
Mhm.
And it came back to help me when I got promoted to major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel, because it went by your date of rank and
Right.
then your date of service.
Right.
So I had the date of rank of captain. All captains in the Army in my year group that went on active duty that summer ended up with the same date of rank for captain, 1
Right.
November.
Okay.
So when the majors list was considered, it went by data rank. So you had thousands of guys that had the data rank of 1 November. But then it went by your active duty date.
Mm.
And so I was like number 1 in
Right.
active duty date. So I actually got promoted ahead of any West Point cadet, ahead of my friend that graduated from Oregon ROTC. And he was actually commissioned at the end of May.
Right.
Before me. He was commissioned, but he didn't go on active duty until our basic course started in July.
Okay.
So I got promoted ahead of Gary Jacobson, one of my best friends, God bless his soul, who he retired as a colonel, a good guy. I got promoted like 6 months before him, and he never let me forget it.
Okay. Listen, that's a good place to end because we're up to the end of a little bit more than a half hour. So very good discussion. I'm going to stop the recording here.